We're all set for our biggest sale of the year, the JCPenney Days sale. With savings on all Woodmere clothing. Save on this suit, these blazers. Save on all Woodmere shirts and ties.
And look, I'll show you gold and more, 25 to 50% off. There's a sale on track and court warm-ups, too. And 25% off all swimwear.
It's the JCPenney Days sale.
You're looking smarter than ever, JCPenney.
What happened to JCPenney? In 1971, JCPenney was on top of the retail world with $5 billion in sales. By 2020, they were filing for bankruptcy. We're about to unpack the decisions that took JCPenney from retail royalty to bargain basement. Ever wonder how a small-town dry goods store became a retail giant? The answer lies in a simple principle, the golden rule. Back in 1902, James Cash Penney opened his first store in Kemmerer, Wyoming. He wasn't just selling clothes and household goods. He was selling an idea. Treat others as you'd want to be treated. Penney's focus on affordable, quality merchandise and conservative money management laid the groundwork for something big. By 1928, that single store had multiplied like rabbits, growing to over 1,000 locations across the country. Talk about a growth spurt. But here's the kicker. When the Great Depression hit, JCPenney's early values resonated with cash-strapped shoppers. It was like they'd been preparing for hard times all along. This connection with customers set the stage for JCPenney's ascent to retail royalty. Climbing the retail ladder, JCPenney's ascent to the top. JCPenney's survival through the Great Depression was just the beginning. What happened next would transform a humble dry goods chain into the king of Main Street America. How did JCPenney go from penny pinching through hard times to defining the look of post-war prosperity? The answer lies in a perfect storm of timing, strategy, and good old American optimism. As World War II drew to a close, the United States found itself in an unprecedented economic boom. Soldiers were coming home, families were growing, and suburbs were sprouting up faster than dandelions in spring. JCPenney saw an opportunity, and boy, did they seize it. Remember those conservative fiscal policies that helped them weather the Depression? Well, now it was time to loosen the purse strings a bit. JCPenney began expanding its product lines faster than you could say, baby boom. No longer content with just selling socks and underwear, they ventured into the world of clothing, home furnishings, and even hardware. It was like watching a caterpillar turn into a butterfly, except this butterfly wore plaid and sold vacuum cleaners. By the 1960s, JCPenney had transformed itself into a full-line department store. Want a new dress for your daughter's first day of school? JCPenney had you covered. Need a lawnmower for your brand new suburban home? JCPenney was your go-to spot. Heck, they even started offering auto services. It was like they were trying to be the Swiss Army knife of retail, a one-stop shop for the American dream. But JCPenney wasn't just expanding its product lines, it was also growing its footprint faster than kudzu in July. By the early 1970s, they were operating over 2,000 stores across the country. That's more locations than there are episodes of I Love Lucy. And believe me, there were a lot of those. JCPenney's growth wasn't just about quantity, though. They had a secret weapon up their sleeve: private label brands. These in-house brands allowed JCPenney to control both quality and pricing, giving them an edge over the competition. It was like they were playing chess while everyone else was still figuring out checkers. And let's not forget about their catalog business. In an era before Amazon Prime and next-day delivery, JCPenney's catalog was the stuff of legend. It became the second largest in the U.S., bringing JCPenney's affordable, quality merchandise to folks who might not have a store nearby. For many Americans, the arrival of the JCPenney catalog was as exciting as Christmas morning. All this expansion and innovation paid off big time. In 1971, JCPenney hit a milestone that would make any retailer green with envy: $5 billion in revenue. To put that in perspective, that's about the same as the entire GDP of Nicaragua today. JCPenney wasn't just a store anymore. It was a symbol of American prosperity and consumer culture. But JCPenney's success wasn't just about being in the right place at the right time. They understood something fundamental about post-war America: the rise of the middle class. As more Americans found themselves with disposable income, JCPenney positioned itself as the go-to store for affordable, quality products. They weren't selling luxury, and they weren't selling bargain basement goods. They were selling the American dream, one washing machine and pair of slacks at a time. Discount dilemma: the rise of new retail rivals. While JCPenney was busy outfitting middle-class America, a retail revolution was brewing in the heartland. Who would have thought that a small-town five and dime could grow into the Goliath that would make JCPenney look like David? The next chapter in JCPenney's story is a tale of adaptation, missed opportunities, and the relentless march of progress. As the 1980s rolled in, a new player entered the retail game, and it wasn't playing by the old rules. Walmart, that scrappy upstart from Arkansas, was about to change everything. While JCPenney had been focusing on department store elegance, Walmart was all about one thing: low prices, all day, every day. Remember how JCPenney had positioned itself as the go-to store for affordable, quality products? Well, Walmart took that idea and supercharged it. They weren't just affordable, they were cheap. And in the 1980s and 1990s, cheap was becoming very, very cool. Consumer preferences were shifting faster than a chameleon on a disco floor. The middle class that JCPenney had so carefully cultivated was now looking for ways to stretch their dollars further. Discount shopping wasn't just a trend, it was becoming a way of life. And JCPenney? Well, they were caught with their red tag sales down. But JCPenney wasn't about to go down without a fight. They started introducing private label items, hoping to compete on price without sacrificing that JCPenney quality. It was like they were trying to beat Walmart at its own game, but with a bit more style. In 2001, as JCPenney celebrated its 100th anniversary, they were also celebrating a new strategy. Private labels were becoming a big part of their offering. It was a smart move, allowing them to control both quality and pricing. But was it enough to stem the tide of discount retailers? JCPenney also tried to modernize its image. In came partnerships with brands like Sephora, creating store-within-a-store concepts. It was an attempt to attract younger consumers, to show that old JCPenney could still be hip and happening. But while they were busy trying to be cool, the retail landscape was shifting beneath their feet. You see, it wasn't just Walmart they had to worry about anymore. The rise of e-commerce, particularly from a little company called Amazon, was about to turn the retail world upside down. As one insider put it, in 2012, consumer shopping was now starting to change in a pretty big way. The internet had changed everything. JCPenney found itself in a tricky spot. They weren't the cheapest option, like Walmart. They weren't the most convenient, like Amazon. And they weren't the most fashionable, like some of their department store rivals. It was like being stuck in the middle seat on a long-haul flight, uncomfortable and with no clear way out. The warning signs were there. In 1980, JCPenney had closed its Treasury discount stores to refocus on its core retail operations. It was an early recognition that they needed to streamline in the face of rising competition. But was it too little, too late? As the new millennium rolled in, JCPenney was starting to look less like a retail innovator and more like a relic of a bygone era. The company that had once been at the forefront of catalog shopping was now struggling to keep up with online retailers. The store that had helped define the look of post-war America was now scrambling to find its place in the digital age. But perhaps the clearest sign of trouble came in 2012. JCPenney implemented a new pricing strategy, and the results were, well, let's just say they weren't pretty. The company saw a 25% decline in comparable store sales. Ouch. It was like watching a friend try to cut their own hair. You knew it wasn't going to end well, but you couldn't look away. The $1.2 billion mistake. JCPenney's pricing blunder. Sometimes the cure is worse than the disease. JCPenney's new strategy was supposed to simplify shopping, but it ended up complicating everything. How did a plan to save the company lead to a staggering $1.2 billion loss? In 2012, JCPenney made a decision that would cost them more than just money. It would cost them their identity. Enter Ron Johnson, the new CEO, fresh from his success at Apple's retail stores. Johnson had a vision. Transform JCPenney from a traditional department store into a hip, modern shopping destination. His weapon of choice, a controversial pricing strategy called Fair and Square. Now you might be thinking, what's so controversial about fair pricing? Well, hold on to your shopping carts, folks, because this is where things get interesting. Johnson's grand plan was to eliminate all those sales, coupons, and promotions that JCPenney customers had come to know and love. Instead, he wanted to offer consistent, everyday low prices. It was like trying to take the bargain out of bargain hunting. The idea behind this strategy was simple. Make shopping easier and more transparent. No more waiting for sales or clipping coupons. Just walk in, see the price, and buy if you like it. It sounds logical, right? After all, it worked for Apple. But here's the thing. Selling iPhones isn't the same as selling sweaters and kitchenware. JCPenney's loyal customers, who had been trained for decades to hunt for deals, suddenly found themselves in unfamiliar territory. It was like showing up to a potluck dinner and finding out it had turned into a formal sit-down affair. People were confused, and more importantly, they felt like they weren't getting the deals they'd come to expect. The backlash was swift and severe. Within a year of implementing the new pricing strategy, JCPenney saw a 25% decline in sales. That's not a typo, folks. 25%. It was like watching a retail train wreck in slow motion. But Johnson wasn't done yet. He decided to overhaul the store layout, too, introducing 100 separate boutiques within JCPenney stores. It was supposed to be a shopping wonderland, a retail theme park of sorts. But for many customers, it felt more like a maze. Where were their favorite brands? Where were the deals? And most importantly, where was the JCPenney they knew and loved? To add insult to injury, Johnson started shifting away from JCPenney's private label brands. These brands had been a cornerstone of JCPenney's business, providing good margins and customer loyalty. It was like a pizza place deciding to stop making pizza and focus on selling gourmet cheese instead. Sure, it might work, but it's not what your customers came for. As one industry expert put it, you just can't take something that works for cell phones and apply it to clothing. It was a classic case of trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, or in this case, trying to fit an Apple Store concept into a traditional department store. The results were disastrous. By the end of 2012, JCPenney reported a loss of over $1.2 billion. Say, that's billion with a B, folks. To put that in perspective, that's like losing $1 for every person in China. It was a financial catastrophe of epic proportions. In April 2013, just 17 months after Johnson took the helm, JCPenney's board decided they'd had enough. They fired Johnson and brought back former CEO Myron Ullman to right the ship. It was like calling your ex to fix the mess your current partner made. Ullman's first order of business? Bring back the old JCPenney. The sales, the coupons, the private labels, everything that made JCPenney, well, JCPenney. It was a stark admission that sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Bargain basement. JCPenney's struggle to stay afloat. Bringing back the old JCPenney was supposed to be the solution, but it turned out to be just the beginning of a new struggle. How did a company that once defined American retail end up fighting for its very survival? The next chapter in JCPenney's story is a roller coaster of hope, disappointment, and desperate attempts to stay relevant in a rapidly changing world. When Myron Ullman returned as CEO in 2013, he faced a daunting task. JCPenney was like a patient in critical condition, and Ullman was the doctor called in for emergency surgery. His first move? Bringing back the promotional pricing strategy that customers had grown to love. It was like slipping into an old, comfortable pair of shoes, familiar and reassuring. But comfort isn't always enough in the cutthroat world of retail. From 2013 to 2018, JCPenney found itself on a financial treadmill, running as fast as it could just to stay in place. The numbers tell a sobering story. By 2018, the company was down to 864 stores, a far cry from its heyday. And in those stores, they were bringing in less money than before, with comparable store sales down 3.1%. It was like watching a heavyweight champion trying to reclaim their title, only to find that the sport had changed entirely. JCPenney was still throwing punches, but the retail world had moved on to a whole new game. Remember when JCPenney's stock was trading at around $88 back in 2006? Well, by 2018, you could buy a share for about the price of a cup of coffee, around $1.50. It was a stark reminder of how far the mighty had fallen. But JCPenney's struggles weren't happening in a vacuum. The entire retail landscape was shifting like sand in a desert storm. E-commerce giants like Amazon were changing the way America shopped. Why drive to the mall when you could order anything you wanted with a click of a button? And discount retailers like Walmart? They were offering rock-bottom prices that made JCPenney's sales look positively expensive. It was as if JCPenney had shown up to a drag race in a Model T. They were trying to compete, but the rules of the game had fundamentally changed. The company's response was like watching someone trying to bail out a sinking ship with a teacup. They closed stores, laid off workers, and tried to streamline operations. But it felt like too little, too late. The debt kept piling up, reaching a staggering $5 billion by 2020. You know how they say it's darkest before the dawn? Well, for JCPenney, it was about to get a whole lot darker. In May 2020, the unthinkable happened. JCPenney, the store that had clothed generations of Americans, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It was like watching the final curtain fall on a century-long performance. As part of its restructuring plan, JCPenney announced the closure of 242 stores. Imagine that. 242 communities losing a piece of their history, 242 parking lots emptying out for the last time. It wasn't just stores closing, it was the end of an era. But here's the thing about JCPenney's story. It's not just about one company's struggle. It's a reflection of broader changes in American retail and consumer culture. The decline of the department store, the rise of e-commerce, the changing tastes of a new generation, JCPenney's troubles are like a mirror reflecting back the massive shifts happening in American society. Chapter 11. The End of an Era. The winds of change that swept through American retail hit JCPenney like a hurricane. By 2020, the company was drowning in $5 billion of debt. What happened next shocked longtime customers and Wall Street alike. Could this century-old retailer find a way to weather the storm? Or was it finally time to turn out the lights? On May 15, 2020, JCPenney made a decision that would have been unthinkable to its founder. The company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. It was a moment that felt like the end of an era, a stark reminder of how far the once mighty retailer had fallen. The path to bankruptcy was paved with challenges that had been building for years. JCPenney's struggle to adapt to the changing retail landscape, coupled with the rise of e-commerce giants and discount retailers, had left the company in a precarious position. The final blow came in the form of the COVID-19 pandemic, which forced the temporary closure of all 846 JCPenney stores across the country. As part of its bankruptcy restructuring, JCPenney announced a plan that would have made even the most stoic shopper shed a tear. The company revealed it would close 242 stores, nearly 30% of its total locations. It was like watching a piece of American retail history crumble before our eyes. But here's where things get interesting. Just when it seemed like JCPenney might go the way of other fallen retail giants, a lifeline appeared. In September 2020, an unlikely pair of saviors emerged: mall owners, Simon Property Group, and Brookfield Property Partners. These two companies, which had a vested interest in keeping their mall anchor tenants alive, agreed to acquire JCPenney for about $800 million. Now you might be thinking, why would anyone want to buy a bankrupt department store? Well, it turns out that even in bankruptcy, JCPenney had some valuable assets. The deal included taking on $500 million of debt, but it also meant preserving a major tenant in hundreds of malls across the country. The acquisition wasn't just about saving real estate, though. It was about saving jobs, an estimated 60,000 of them. In a time when unemployment was skyrocketing due to the pandemic, this was no small feat. It was like watching a last-minute rescue in an old Western movie, with Simon and Brookfield riding in just as the credits were about to roll. But not everyone was cheering this rescue. While JCPenney was fighting for survival, its management faced criticism for awarding nearly $10 million in bonuses to senior executives. It was a move that left many scratching their heads. After all, handing out bonuses while closing stores and laying off workers seemed about as tone-deaf as playing "We Are the Champions" at a funeral. As JCPenney emerged from bankruptcy under new ownership in December 2020, the retail world watched with bated breath. Could this 118-year-old company reinvent itself for the digital age? Or was this just delaying the inevitable? The new JCPenney wasted no time in trying to right the ship. By June 2021, the company had closed a total of 175 stores as part of its restructuring efforts. It was like watching a plant being pruned, painful, but necessary for future growth. But here's the million-dollar question. What does JCPenney's bankruptcy and acquisition mean for the future of traditional retail in America? Well, it's complicated. On one hand, it shows that even iconic brands aren't immune to the seismic shifts in consumer behavior. The rise of online shopping, changing fashion trends, and the decline of mall culture have all taken their toll. On the other hand, the fact that major real estate companies were willing to invest in JCPenney suggests that there's still value in the traditional retail model. Maybe, just maybe, there's room for both online and brick-and-mortar stores in the future of retail. Reinvention, or relic, JCPenney's uncertain future. As JCPenney steps into its next era, a curious question arises. Could nostalgia be the key to its survival? In a world of fast fashion and one-click purchases, JCPenney's greatest asset might just be the memories it holds for generations of Americans. But is sentimentality enough to keep the lights on in the age of e-commerce? Today, JCPenney operates 663 stores across 49 U.S. states and Puerto Rico. It's a far cry from its peak of over 2,000 locations, but it's still a significant presence in the American retail landscape. The company's revenue in 2019 was reported at approximately $11.167 billion. Not too shabby, right? Well, not so fast. That same year, JCPenney faced an operating income of $8 million. It's like running a marathon, only to find out you've been on a treadmill the whole time. JCPenney's current strategy is a bit like trying to have your cake and eat it too. They're mixing traditional retail with online sales, hoping to capture the best of both worlds. It's like watching your grandpa try to use Instagram. There's something endearing about it, but you're not quite sure it's going to work out. The challenges facing JCPenney are about as numerous as the items in their old big book catalog. For starters, their stores are often viewed as outdated and uninteresting. It's like stepping into a time machine, but not in a cool, retro way. More like in a "why hasn't this been updated since 1995" way. And let's not forget about their declining customer base. JCPenney has been reporting losses for several consecutive years, including a $255 million loss in 2018. That's enough red ink to print a whole new catalog, but it's not all doom and gloom for the old JC. In 2021, Mark Rosen was appointed as CEO with the goal of leading JCPenney through its reinvention phase post-bankruptcy. It's like the retail equivalent of a Rocky training montage. JCPenney's got its sweatband on, and it's ready to fight. One of JCPenney's strategies has been to introduce shop-in-shop concepts featuring indie and BIPOC brands. It's an attempt to modernize and appeal to younger consumers. But here's the thing, JCPenney isn't just trying to be hip and cool. They're also leaning into their history, using nostalgia as a secret weapon. Remember those fond memories of back-to-school shopping at JCPenney? The company is hoping you do, and they're banking on that nostalgia to keep loyal customers coming back while attracting new ones. It's like comfort food for your shopping experience. Familiar, reassuring, and maybe just what we need in these uncertain times. But nostalgia alone isn't enough to save a retail giant. JCPenney has been trying to reinvent itself, reintroducing large appliances and focusing on apparel. However, these strategies have often faced execution challenges and mixed results. It's like trying to learn to ride a bike again after years of driving a car. The intention is good, but the execution can be a bit wobbly. In a bold move that shows JCPenney isn't ready to throw in the towel just yet, the company's owners, Simon and Brookfield, made a bid to purchase Kohl's for around $8.6 billion in April 2022. It's like watching your favorite underdog sports team suddenly try to buy the championship team. Ambitious? Absolutely. A little bit crazy? Maybe. But it shows that JCPenney's new owners believe there's still life in the old retail model. As we look at JCPenney's uncertain future, we can't help but reflect on what its story tells us about American retail and consumer culture. JCPenney isn't just a store, it's a mirror reflecting the changes in how we shop, what we value, and how we view ourselves as consumers. Its struggles and attempts at reinvention are a microcosm of the broader shifts happening in American society. Well, folks, JCPenney's roller coaster ride through retail history has some valuable lessons for us all. James Cash, Penney's golden rule of customer satisfaction still rings true today. But as we've seen, even the mightiest can fall if they don't keep up with the times. JCPenney's story is a stark reminder that understanding and adapting to changing consumer needs is crucial. It's not just about selling stuff, it's about selling the right stuff to the right people at the right time. But here's the kicker. While adapting is important, staying true to your core values is just as vital. As we look to the future of retail, we can't help but wonder, can traditional department stores like JCPenney survive in an era dominated by e-commerce and changing consumer preferences? Only time will tell. But one thing's for sure, the retail landscape ain't what it used to be.